It had always been his, and no one would ever take it from him again. The sound of metal groaning against the morning breeze sent a chill down my spine. I stepped outside, expecting to breathe in the crisp air of another hard day's work on my farm, but what I saw instead sent a surge of anger through my veins. A massive semi-truck, its hulking frame like a steel blockade, was parked right across my private farm road, my only road in and out. My breath hitched, disbelief warring with rage. This wasn't just inconvenient. It was deliberate. Someone had gone out of their way to make sure I couldn't move my equipment, couldn't get my supplies, couldn't even leave if I needed to. And I knew exactly who had done it. HOA Karen. Love seeing entitled people get what they deserve. Subscribe for more crazy stories like this. For months, she had been circling my land like a vulture, demanding I join the HOA she controlled like a personal kingdom. I refused every single time. This farm was my blood, sweat, and legacy. It wasn't some suburban cul-de-sac with manicured lawns and matching mailboxes. It was acres of soil I had poured my soul into. But Karen didn't care about that. She saw my property as nothing more than an untapped resource she could fold into her empire. And now, she had escalated from petty fines and fake HOA letters to outright sabotage. I clenched my fists and took a deep breath, forcing myself to think instead of act on impulse. My security cameras. My farm had cameras to monitor the animals and property. If she was behind this, I'd have proof. Storming back inside, I pulled up the footage on my phone. My jaw tightened as the screen loaded. There she was, Karen, standing with a man, probably the driver, pointing and gesturing at my land as if she owned it. The timestamp was just past midnight. She had snuck onto my property in the dead of night and parked this beast of a truck across my road. The nerve. I grabbed my phone and called the number on the side of the truck, hoping it was a company that would listen to reason. It rang, then a gruff voice answered. "Yeah, this is Sam, the owner of the farm on Ridgeway. One of your trucks is blocking my only road. It needs to be moved immediately." There was a pause. "Farm on Ridgeway?" "Yes, the one that's private property." Another pause. Then the man sighed. "Lady hired me for a quick job. Said it was her land. Paid cash." Karen, paying in cash so there'd be no paper trail. I gritted my teeth. "Well," she lied, "that land is mine. And if the truck isn't gone in the next hour, I'm having it towed." The driver swore under his breath. "Look, I just did what I was paid to do. You want it moved. You're going to have to talk to her." He hung up. I inhaled sharply through my nose, willing myself not to throw my phone across the room. Of course, she wasn't going to make this easy. I marched across the field to her house, my boots grinding into the dirt. She lived just a few blocks away, in one of those pristine homes where she ruled like a self-appointed queen. I barely knocked before the door swung open. "Oh, Sam, what a surprise," Karen said, feigning innocence with an infuriating smile. "You know damn well why I'm here," I snapped. "Move the truck." Her expression barely faltered. "Oh, that? Well, see, we had a little misunderstanding. That road," my road, "is in an area the HOA has been reviewing for new development. It would really be in your best interest to join, you know. Then we could avoid these little conflicts." My hands curled into fists at my sides. "You think you can park a semi-truck on my property and blackmail me into joining?" She let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head. "Blackmail? No, Sam. I'm just saying that being part of a community means cooperating. You're going to move that truck, Karen." She tilted her head, as if considering it. "Or what? Call a tow truck? Good luck with that. Those things aren't easy to tow, and they sure as hell don't do it for free. And even if you do, well, that might be a bit of a legal gray area." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "You don't get to use my land as your personal chessboard. If that truck isn't gone by the end of the day, I will call the police." And if you try anything else, I'll take this to court." She smiled wider, as if she had won some invisible game. "Oh, Sam, you really should rethink your stance on the HOA. It would be so much easier for everyone." I turned on my heel and left before I said something I'd regret. Back at the farm, I started making calls. Tow companies, lawyers, anyone who could help me deal with this mess. The first 3 tow companies refused, saying they didn't have the equipment for a semi. The 4th finally agreed, but at a steep price. I swallowed the cost. Getting this truck off my land was worth every penny. Hours later, as the massive tow rig hauled the semi-truck off my property, I stood with my arms crossed, watching with grim satisfaction. But just as I thought the nightmare was over, 2 squad cars pulled up my driveway. Karen had called the cops on me. The moment the squad cars pulled up, my stomach clenched. I had expected Karen to throw a fit, maybe scream at me over the phone, but calling the police? That was a new low, even for her. 2 officers stepped out, one looking serious, while the other had the exhausted expression of someone who had probably been forced to respond to HOA disputes one too many times. Karen was already outside, her arms folded, chin lifted in the air as if she was about to present some grand case against me. I could see the smirk on her face as she pointed toward me. "That's him, officers. He stole my property and had it towed illegally." I exhaled through my nose, forcing myself to stay calm as the officers approached. One of them, Officer Grayson, took out a notepad. "Sir, we receive a report that you towed a vehicle without the owner's consent. Can you explain what happened?" I gestured toward my land. The tire marks from where the semi-truck had been still fresh in the dirt. That truck was parked on my property without my permission. I have security footage showing that Karen hired someone to place it there in the middle of the night. It was blocking my only access road. So yes, I had it towed. Karen scoffed, shaking her head dramatically. "Oh, please. He's lying. I have written proof that he allowed me to use that space." My head snapped toward her. "What?" With a smug grin, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded paper, handing it to the officer. He unfolded it and read for a moment before looking back at me. "Sir, this appears to be an agreement stating that you gave her permission to park the vehicle here." I snatched the paper from his hands, and my eyes scanned over it. My name was scribbled at the bottom, but the signature, it wasn't mine. My pulse pounded in my ears as I turned to Karen, who was watching me with an infuriatingly satisfied look. She had forged my signature. My grip tightened on the paper as I forced my voice to stay even. "This is fake." Officer Grayson raised an eyebrow. "Are you saying this document was forged?" "Of course it is. I would never agree to something like this." I turned my phone toward him, pulling up the footage of Karen and the driver sneaking onto my property. "Here, this is her in the middle of the night, directing the truck onto my land." The officer took the phone and watched the video, nodding slowly. But before I could feel any relief, Karen let out a dramatic sigh. "Oh, this is ridiculous. That video doesn't prove anything. It just shows me standing there. I paid to use that space, and Sam is just trying to back out of our agreement now." I could see the hesitation in the officer's face. If he couldn't immediately disprove the document, then the whole situation became a legal mess. My stomach sank as I realized exactly what Karen was doing. She was playing the long game, forcing this into a legal battle where it would become a matter of, she said with no clear answer. If the cops sided with her now, I could be the one in trouble for towing the truck. The thought made my blood boil. I took a step closer, gripping the paper in my hand. "If you really think I signed this, then let's take it to court. A handwriting analyst will prove that this isn't mine." "You really want to go that far, Karen?" For the first time, I saw a flicker of something uncertain in her expression, but she masked it quickly. She turned back to the officers with an exaggerated shrug. "I just want what's fair. If he says it's fake, then let's get it verified. Until then, I demand he pays for the damages of towing my property." Your property? I nearly laughed. That truck isn't even yours. You hired a driver, she gasped, clutching her chest like I had just insulted her honor. That is irrelevant. I was in charge of it. The officers exchanged a glance before Officer Grayson sighed and handed me back my phone. Look, this is clearly a civil dispute. Since there's a disagreement over the validity of this document, this is something that needs to be handled in court. For now, we won't be making any arrests, but I'd advise both of you to settle this through legal channels. Karen looked like she had just won the lottery. I, on the other hand, felt the heat rising in my chest. This was exactly what she wanted. To drag me into an expensive legal fight where she could waste my time and money until I either gave in or lost patience. But I wasn't going to let that happen. The cops left, and Karen turned to me with a slow smile. I told you, Sam. You should have just joined the HOA. Now, you'll see how hard things can get when you refuse to cooperate. She walked off, and for the first time, I understood exactly what kind of fight I was in. This wasn't just about a truck. This was about power. Karen wanted control, and she was willing to lie, cheat, and manipulate the system to get it. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't about to let her win. I spent the next day gathering every piece of evidence I could. The security footage, records of my property ownership, even old documents that showed my real signature so that a handwriting analyst could prove hers was fake. I reached out to a lawyer, someone who had dealt with HOA overreach before, and by the time our first court date was set, I was ready. But just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, Karen made her next move. I received an official letter from the county. She had reported me for violating community standard and was pushing for my land to be rezoned. If she succeeded, it could strip me of my property rights altogether. My blood ran cold as I realized what she was doing. She wasn't just trying to bully me into submission. She was trying to take my farm. The moment I saw that letter, a cold rage settled deep in my chest. Karen wasn't just trying to make my life miserable anymore. She was actively working to take away the land that had been in my family for generations. I had spent years maintaining this farm, pouring my blood and sweat into it. And she thought she could steal it away with some underhanded legal tricks? No, that wasn't going to happen. I clenched the letter in my fist, forcing myself to take a deep breath. Reacting in anger wouldn't help me, but gathering every shred of proof that she was lying and corrupt would. I spent the next 2 days doing nothing but preparing for the fight ahead. My lawyer was already working on getting her forged document thrown out in court, but now I had to prove that her attempt to rezone my land was nothing but a fraudulent scheme. I started by digging into the county's property records, checking if there had been any prior complaints about my farm. Nothing. My land had always been designated as private agricultural property, and there had never been any violations. That meant Karen had either lied on her report or had bribed someone to push it through. Either way, it gave me something to fight with. But I needed more. That's when I decided to track down the semi-truck driver, the one Karen had hired to block my road. If I could get him to testify that she had misled him about who owned the land, it would be one more nail in her coffin. It took a few phone calls and some digging, but I eventually found the guy. His name was Dave, and when I explained what was happening, I could hear the regret in his voice. He agreed to meet me at a diner on the edge of town, and when I got there, he looked uneasy. I could tell he wasn't the type who liked getting involved in legal trouble, but after I explained how Karen was trying to take my farm, he sighed and ran a hand over his face. "Man, I had no idea she was lying," he muttered. "She told me it was her land, paid me in cash, and said it was just a short-term parking job. If I had known she was pulling something like this, I never would have taken the job." I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "Would you be willing to say that in court?" He hesitated, shifting in his seat. "I don't want to get dragged into something messy, but yeah, if it helps clear your name, I'll tell the truth." Relief flooded through me. This was exactly what I needed. If Dave testified, it would directly prove that Karen had lied about the agreement and planted that fake contract as a way to cover her tracks. My case was getting stronger, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she cracked. But Karen wasn't going down without a fight. A week later, when the court date finally arrived, she came in with her usual smugness, wearing a sharp suit and walking like she already had the victory in her pocket. She sat across from me at the long table, her lawyer flipping through a thick binder of legal documents, while mine remained calm, confident, and prepared. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Karen's lawyer went first, presenting the forged contract as proof that I had given her permission to use my land. He spun some nonsense about how I had changed my mind and acted in bad faith by towing the truck. I sat there, barely restraining my anger as I listened to the lies. Then it was our turn. My lawyer calmly presented the video footage of Karen sneaking onto my property with the truck driver in the dead of night. The judge watched intently. Then we called in the handwriting expert, who testified that the signature on her so-called contract was an obvious forgery. I glanced at Karen, expecting to see her breaking under pressure, but she kept that same smug look as if she still had an ace up her sleeve. That's when we called Dave to the stand. He stepped forward, adjusting his cap, looking a little nervous but firm in his words. Karen hired me to drop off the truck, he said. She told me the land was hers and that she had permission. I didn't know she was lying. The courtroom was silent for a moment. Then the judge turned to Karen. Miss Robinson, do you have any response to this testimony? For the first time, Karen's confidence wavered. She stammered, her fingers tightening around the table. I was under the impression that... The judge cut her off. That's enough. He turned his attention back to my lawyer. Given the evidence presented, I find the contract in question to be fraudulent. The defendant had every right to remove the truck from his property. A rush of relief washed over me. But before I could even process the win, the judge continued. Furthermore, the court takes allegations of forgery very seriously. Miss Robinson, you will be investigated for document falsification and property fraud. Karen's face drained of color. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. It was like she had finally realized just how deep she had dug herself into this mess. My lawyer leaned over, whispering, "We're not done yet." The next bombshell hit just days later. While the forgery case was being processed, another discovery was made. Karen had been planning to use my land for a personal real estate project. She had secretly submitted proposals to the county, claiming she was acquiring my farm for HOA development. But here was the kicker. She wasn't planning to put it under the HOA's name. She was planning to have the new properties under her own name so that she could personally profit from them. The county's officials were furious when they realized they had nearly been scammed. And just like that, Karen went from an HOA tyrant to a criminal suspect facing serious charges. It was over. The walls were closing in on her, and there was nothing she could do to escape. She had spent so much time trying to control and manipulate people that she had forgotten one thing. Lies only work until the truth comes out. And now, the truth was burying her alive. I stepped out of that courthouse, the sun warm on my face, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace. My land was safe. My name was cleared. And Karen, she was about to face the consequences of every single scheme she had ever pulled. But even then, I had no idea just how far her downfall would go. Because as it turned out, the HOA had been investigating her, too, and they had uncovered something even worse. The fallout from Karen's lies was even more catastrophic than I could have imagined. While I had been busy proving my case in court, the HOA board had been running their own internal investigation, and what they uncovered made my situation look like child's play. Karen hadn't just been trying to steal my land. She had been siphoning HOA funds for years, using the collected fees for her own personal expenses, while pretending the money was going toward community improvements. The real kicker? The very homes she had planned to build on my farm weren't even for the benefit of the HOA. She had been working with a shady developer to sell the lots under the table, lining her pockets while the HOA members thought she was investing in the neighborhood's future. It was a full-blown scandal, and the moment the board got wind of it, They wasted no time in turning on her. I found out when one of the HOA members, a guy named Mark who had always seemed uncomfortable with Karen's antics, showed up at my farm looking both furious and embarrassed. He apologized on behalf of the HOA, explaining that they had no idea she had been abusing her position so badly. We started looking into the financial records after your case went public, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. Turns out, she's been draining funds for years. HOA dues that were supposed to go toward road maintenance, landscaping, even community events. None of it was ever used for what she claimed. We're talking thousands of dollars missing. I couldn't say I was surprised. Karen had always acted like she was untouchable, like she could twist the system to suit her needs without consequence. But now, everything was unraveling. The HOA board called an emergency meeting, stripping her of her position immediately. Residents who had once backed her blindly were now demanding answers, and the worst part for her was that she had nowhere to run. With the county already investigating her for document forgery and property fraud, the additional allegations of embezzlement made her situation even worse. She wasn't just looking at fines or a slap on the wrist. She was looking at real jail time. The police were brought in to review the financial discrepancies, and within a week, Karen was formally charged with multiple counts of fraud. The news spread like wildfire. Neighbors whispered about her in hushed tones, her once loyal supporters now acting like they had never known her. People who had once followed her rules religiously were now furious, realizing they had been paying dues to fund Karen's lavish lifestyle instead of actual neighborhood improvements. The once pristine front lawn of her house was suddenly overgrown with weeds, her perfect facade crumbling along with her reputation. As much as I wanted to celebrate, I knew my fight wasn't completely over. Karen might have been facing justice, but she had still tried to steal my farm, and I wasn't about to let that slide. With the fraudulent contract ruled invalid, my lawyer helped me file a countersuit against her for damages, covering the cost of legal fees, the towing, and emotional distress from dealing with months of harassment. I wanted to make sure she never tried anything like this again. She didn't even bother fighting the lawsuit. With her legal battles piling up and her financial situation in ruins, she had no choice but to accept the judgment. A hefty sum was awarded to me, and though I doubted I would ever see a dime of it, knowing that she was now drowning in her own consequences was satisfaction enough. Her house, once the symbol of her power, went into foreclosure shortly after, and she vanished from the neighborhood without a word. No one knew where she went, and frankly, no one cared. The HOA had to do damage control for months, working to restore trust in the community. But people were more cautious now. The new board members made transparency their top priority, and while I still had no interest in ever joining an HOA, at least I didn't have to worry about them trying to take my land again. The biggest relief, though, was simply being able to step onto my farm without the constant threat of Karen looming over me. I could finally get back to the life I had worked so hard to build, free from her schemes and manipulation. One afternoon, as I walked the perimeter of my land, I took a deep breath of the fresh air, feeling the weight that had been pressing down on me for months finally lift. The fields stretched out before me, untouched, just as they should be. It was my land, my home, and no one, not even the most corrupt HOA Karen, was ever going to take that away from me.